Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 69, nice, of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin, that's Kevin.
We've ended the first game of the Crossbell arc. We are starting our second full year of the Trails in the Pod podcast. 2023 was the first. A year ago today, Colin, we were in our January hiatus. We hadn't even started Trails the Third, and now we are ending Trails from Zero. And we got a jam-packed episode full of burning questions like, does fishing make you evil?
The answer, obviously, is yes. The other burning question for listeners of the podcast is, will it take them an entire year to play more than 2 games this year?
And the answer is no.
Well, we'll see. So yeah, that's right. We finished chapter 5. Chapter 5 is like it's dense. It's not as long as I thought it was. The final dungeon in Azure is very long, but this one really wasn't that long. You beat it in a day. I beat it in two, and I just divided it up. But there's a lot of lore drops. There's a lot of revelations. There's a lot of loose ends being tied up. So first of all, why don't we talk impressions? What was your impression of this chapter?
I thought it was a good chapter. The mix between the different stages, Crossbell, the hospital, the Sun Fort, Star Fort, the final dungeon, was good. The variety of familiar and new geographic locations and settings, not all in the final dungeon, but it all felt like we were building up for the climax. I thought that was a good design choice. There's only one major complaint that I have for the chapter. We'll get to that when we get to the final dungeon part. Give you a hint. It's about Joshua and Estelle, and to a lesser extent, Ren.
I knew you were going to hate that. I knew you were going to hate that, and I even predicted that you would hate this in our first episode on Trails from Zero.
What do you mean?
I said that there was something in the finale that you were going to hate, that with enough context that you'll get way later, you'll actually like.
I hate it now. When do I get the context?
End of the next
Who
bit.
though? Okay, but that's then. This is now. And when is now? Right now.
Before we get to the Sunfort, why don't we just talk about the feeling of the chapter? Because the one word encapsulates for me this chapter and the moments that we see in this chapter, which is badassery. And not just on the part of the SSS, but also when so everybody's taken over by drugs, right? The GCF is taken over by drugs. The CPD is taken over by drugs. It's basically Gotham City, and the Joker took it all over because somehow the cult is just that powerful all of a sudden. But we have Sergey, we have Dudley, and we have this insane chase throughout the city of Crossbell. And it's weird because on the one hand, the setting is so badass. The music is fitting, the movements of the characters, even though these are 2D sprites in a basic 3D plane, it successfully conveys this sense of urgency, the sense of, oh my god, we need to find a way out. We need to save Shizuki. We need to save Kia. We need to take care of everybody. But on the other hand, all of these enemies have machine guns, and they must shoot like stormtroopers because nobody ever gets shot.
The lack of permanent consequences is a recurring theme in general. I'll have more to say on that. I'm sure you'll have some parts to say, maybe disagreeing with my bloodthirsty nature. But this chase occurs about the end of the second act of the chapter. We don't start with the chase. We start in our fair city, Crossbell.
We start off with a cutscene with Ren.
So we have the context later for the cutscene, but I'm going to have a bold position, Colin, a hot take, if you will. I don't think...
Well, hold on. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Kevin's going to have a hot take. Hold the presses. Hold the presses, motherfucker.
I don't think this cutscene was all that necessary or did that much. So what this cutscene is, it's Ren observing the materials, what's going on. The doll maker comes, they have a chat. Pater Mater, the repairs, modifications are fixed. They move up their afternoon tea. What does this tell us? That Ren, to some extent, maybe greater or lesser, trusts Grandpa. They have a good working relationship. We get some more info on what Ren's doing in Crossbell, but I don't think it was all that necessary. If we first saw Ren when she showed up with Pater Mater in the end, I would not have questioned how did she get here? What was she doing before this? I would have accepted it without any issue. And it just felt disconnected from the main events of the chapter. Now, I'm sure you'll say it's setting up something for the future, and that's totally fine. Well, you're shaking your head no, but if it was, I would say don't do it with the very first scene of the chapter because it's dissonance. Because we don't get back to it for the rest of the game in a literal sense for the rest of the chapter.
I mean, okay, I should say it is setting up some stuff for the next game, but really what this cutscene is doing, I think, is two things. The first is that Ren has made allusion earlier in the game to a friend needing repairs or needing to be patched up. And this cutscene, I believe, is the one that reveals that it's Pater Mater, but we can already infer that it is. And so, therefore, in the terms of like
Yes.
cause and effect, we need to see, oh, now the repairs are done. That's why Ren can, use Pater Mater, which is important for the culminating scene of the game, which I know that you don't like, but, we'll talk about it when we get to that part.
It is not important. I don't think it's necessary. If Ren just showed up, I would have thought, oh, the repairs must be done. Like there was only one person that these repairs could be referring to, given Ren's alienation from most people. And
there's another thing that happens in this scene that perhaps could have been conveyed in a different way, but the information needed to be conveyed, which is that Crossbell is a neutral zone between the church and Ouroboros, aka Ouroboros is not acting in this situation, neither is the church. So we don't have the Grolsritter coming in or anything like that.
That's true. That's important. Okay, I'll concede on that point. I just think it would have worked better as a intermediary cutscene to just having it be the first scene of the chapter. Just I don't know. Maybe I'm putting too much stock in introductions.
I think that something that we are seeing in this game is that how you think chapters should be structured and how Falcom thinks chapters should be structured are two different things. And often Falcom will have a design around how they structure their chapters that will pay off later that you don't see when you record an episode of Trails in the Pod. For instance, you really didn't like the beginning of chapter 3 when the first day was spent introducing us to Joachim Gunther. But now you can see why it is so important that we spent that time with him.
I didn't like it because of Joachim Gunther. I didn't like it because of the fishing. It was not an unimportant side character.
You thought that there was no reason for us to know. You thought there was no reason there was no reason for us to get to know Joachim Gunther.
That is a lie. That is a lie.
That is not a lie. We can go back and roll the tape. We're not going to because we're too lazy, but it's there.
I don't think we need to do that. I don't think you should humiliate yourself like that.
If anybody on Twitter wants to take a sound clip of Kevin talking about why he doesn't like the beginning of chapter 3 and share it with us, please do. I would love to send this to him in the middle of the night on Facebook Messenger.
I would just lie, Colin. Because you know who's a liar? Ren. One thing I found was interesting was it's neutral zone, which I wonder, is that new? Was it a neutral zone before the establishment of Crossbell State, which, as we remember, is a fairly recent phenomenon, historically speaking? Decades. 70 years, not 700.
I don't think we have enough information to answer that, really.
It tells us why we don't see the society or the church, and I kept kind of waiting for the society to become involved throughout the game, kind of. Well, I was unsure to the extent, but it wasn't. We'll talk more about that next week, but I thought it was highly, highly interesting. And after we get done with Ren, we go to Crossbell. We're waiting on results from the hospital, on test results. They're not coming yet. So something suspicious is up.
Yeah, when somebody says, I'll call you at noon, and then they don't call you at 2, at 3, or 4, or 5, you've probably been ghosted. But in this case, you should go investigate.
Yes, I sympathize a lot with the members of the SSS to go through a dangerous set of the countryside, battle monsters, walk on foot. They'd rather do that than pick up the phone and call someone. So that really touched a chord in my heart.
No, they did try. They did try to call them. Nobody was answering the phone.
We go to the hospital, St. Ursula's Hospital. We pass by an empty bus. something sus happened to the bus riders on the way to the hospital. We get there at evening, so this part of the chapter is fairly straightforward. Clear the hospital, confront the big boss, but we do it with a new party member. And who is it, Colin?
We finally get to play with Yin, who we know is Risha Mao, but the SSS does not know that. Did you use Yin in your party at all?
Oh yes, I took her in place of Tio.
Yeah, same. And I have to say, I love using Yin. She is so OP sometimes. I mean, one of her crafts has a
Yes.
90% chance of just killing somebody outright. Which, like, Randy has a similar thing, not nearly as high success rate, but especially for some of these monsters that are really freaking annoying, they just have Yin, boom, kill one. It's so helpful.
Ian's good. I always try to use new party members because it's most likely we won't be with them on a permanent basis. The exception is the final dungeon. But I used Noel, Wazy. What say you?
But you kind of had to use Waji.
Oh my god, Colin. But it's varying it up. That's why I really enjoyed that part of the previous game of the third. Sometimes you had to use the new party member, other times you get to choose among eventually what, 12 or so? That was a great part of the game. Loved it.
Maybe this is something we should talk about more next week when we do our review of the game. But we say next week; it'll happen like in 2 weeks for us. But when we were playing FC, we had a different dynamic, right? In which we had two core party members, and then anywhere from 2 to 3, or 1 to 3, were added each chapter. I think that's right. Meaning that we were always given new party members to play with, but also nobody stayed for more than a chapter up until the final dungeon.
I thought it was 1 to 2. I thought Shira was there for a goodly portion.
Oh, so Shara's there in the first chapter when we head up to
West.
was it Jose?
Ruan.
Ruan, but she leaves after that, I'm pretty sure.
And then it's Shira, Olivier Zinn. Do we get like a staggered rotation? Was that it?
No. If you remember, so like we have Shara and Olivia,
Tita's in.
and then Olivier and Shara both leave. We pick up Chloe
Yes,
in
yes.
Bose. She leaves after that. Don't we have somebody? Is it a is it only a 3 party member chapter?
I believe.
I think it is. And then after that, we pick up Tita and Zin.
Okay, that is almost 2 years in the past.
We also get Agate. In Bose. That's why I was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that there we have like a constant introduction of new party members that stay for longer than like our temporary party members here, where they're here for like a dungeon. But at the same time, we don't get a core full party. Which one do you think is more successful?
Gameplay or plot progression, or both?
Whichever one meets your fancy.
So gameplay wise, I like the variation, the different strategies. Joshua Estelle Chloe plays differently than Joshua Estelle Agate. How we use them, which one's the caster,
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So that was good. Changing up how do you play the game. Plot wise, having the core four, so to speak, bounce off each other the entire game, I thought was a very good move. We got to know all of them in detail, the interactions with each other, with other people. So it's a fine line to walk. There's some tension, as you just heard.
I think I agree with you plot wise for sure. Gameplay wise, I think I like the zero system better because there it's like through the whole game you're building up your party, you're building up your strategies to the point where, like, I remember when I was first playing Zero, it actually took me quite a bit to connect with the SSS. I had missed Joshua and Estelle, and yet I found myself in the position at the end of the game when you're able to play with Joshua and Estelle that I didn't want to play with them. Not that I minded them being with us, which I know that you kind of do, but I didn't feel the need to put them in my party. They were fine as support. And if I think that if it was just like, say, Lloyd and Ellie, and then we had Wazzy come in for a chapter, and Dudley come in for a chapter, and Randy come in for a chapter, that I would be far more open to putting Estelle and Joshua in. And keeping everybody together was really important plot-wise, but then also gameplay-wise, which supported the connection that I felt to the SSS at the end.
And I get that. Ways of playing and engaging with the game. Neither one is right or wrong. I mean, I'm right. Don't tell Colin that, guys. Just.
Should Should we talk about maybe some of the revelations that we got at the end of the hospital?
For the most part, demons are not involved.
I mean, sure, but that's not what I'm talking about.
The fight with Ernest?
Well, the information we get before the fight with Ernest, or after the fight with Ernest.
I thought it's after the fight with Ernest. So this boss fight with Ernest recently escaped from jail. He's taken a lot of the Gnosis pills. My interpretation of all this is, and Joaquin later on, Gunther mentions what the cult did with the demonic was not that was not the main part. It's like he kind of looked down upon them treating with devils and demons. The Gnosis pills are very much in the mundane, more so than the other MacGuffins or whatever of the other games.
I think it's hard to describe something as mundane where if you take a strong enough concentration, you can become a demon.
Okay, so we learned that Ren is involved with all this, guys.
I mean, so like, I guess going ahead, I mean, it is interesting that Joaquin says that they don't worship devils. That's important, but I think what the natural implication there is that the cult is trying to harness the power of devils, trying to control uh, hellish power. He claims that the demonic iconography is meant as like a fuck you to the Church of Idios, but the fact that they can turn into demons, I think kind of puts the light of that to some extent. But what you also see is that when he turns into a demon at the end, that he thinks that he's like seen true wisdom, that there's something that we also saw with Weissman, that once you transcend humanity, you can really grasp the nature of things. And that is like true gnosis. That's true wisdom. That's true power. That somehow are both able to be beaten by people with sticks. But it shows that it's not about worshiping demons, it's about trying to defeat humanity, to transcend humanity.
I want to say one thing. Take a bunch of Gnosis pills and you get knowledge and wisdom and understanding. That is a pretty good engagement with what does Gnosis in the ancient Koine Greek, what does it mean? And what is Gnosticism? So my applause to the developers on that account.
Yeah, I agree. But you know what idea hit my head when I saw this guy do that and he could like tell the future and he knew all of this stuff. Why not just get an old guy on like the brink of death, right? And get him to agree to take like 10 of these pills and turn into a demon and then answer all of our questions.
Colin, 'cause then we wouldn't have a game.
Well, we'd have a different game. But what I'm saying is that it does seem like there is some use to these demon drugs that maybe they could be used in a controlled environment, in like a safe drug consumption place under controlled conditions with certain people. Maybe we can use that for the benefit of the state.
This is such a hypothetical. I don't know how to engage with it beyond, okay, I can theoretically see it.
So you agree that taking drugs can be good? I want that on record for you.
Yes,
Kevin Bloomfield likes taking drugs.
Dare and Shambles. You know what I also like? Backstory.
Yeah, we like backstory. What backstory are you talking about?
We learned that then this was not just sexual slavery, and I'm pretty sure that with the comments that either Ernest or Dr. Gunther made, that it's 99% confirmed there was sexual abuse involved.
Yes, and this is something that I really want to praise this particular localization for, because when I played this originally, I'm fairly certain that it became way more ambiguous. Something that I really liked about the third was that they leaned very heavily on this abuse of Ren, made it really heart-wrenching. But then when you learned about the DG cult and the experiments done and that Ren was undergoing the same thing, at least my impression of it when I first played it was that Ren was experimented upon. She was not undergoing this harsher treatment and abuse that we had seen. Whereas this localization makes it pretty clear that no, Ren's Lodge was doing something else. Paradise was inhumane. It was awful. Which then implies the stuff that we had seen in the third. So I mean, I could be misremembering, but that was the impression that I had that Falcom kind of walked it back. And in this version of the game, they lean into it, and I think that's truly excellent.
Yeah, and I don't know how I feel about Gunther. I don't want to say being against Paradise, but
It's weird because he both like he distances himself from it, but also makes use of it. I mean, one of the reasons why the DG cult is able to do this, is able to have all of its political connections, is because they're blackmailing Speaker Hartman by inviting him to paradise and then having blackmail material on him. It's basically a Jeffrey Epstein before people had known about Jeffrey Epstein. What I don't know, like Gunter seems to be wanting to both have his cake and eat it too, and I'm not sure how convincing that is.
Is it the game trying to make him more sympathetic? Or is it the game having him be more, I guess, clinical, like these were bad testing condition, but we got some use out of the project?
Like I think the game is trying to paint Gunter as somebody kind of like Weissman. We were talking about this, where he's not mindlessly evil. He has a goal. He's fine with using evil means for what he considers to be just and good ends. And the game makes that point very explicitly, with Estelle like saying, "Oh, this guy's even more deranged than Weissman. He
Yes.
makes Weissman look like a saint." They're trying to pull this off with Gunter as well, and the game kind of goes out of its way pointing out that it's unsuccessful in that, which I think is interesting. That it kind of shows the derangement that Gunter can undergo by convincing himself that he's on the just end when everybody else in the game can see, no, he is just a deranged lunatic. Up until the end, and then Lloyd's like, "Oh, I feel bad for him." And then Randy has to slap him to be like, "Yo, what are you talking about?"
He won't shy away from killing someone if you think it'll further his goals, but he won't just go kill someone for the hell of it.
Somehow we've managed to talk more about the end of this chapter than like anything before that.
I'm sticking to the chronological order. I have not talked one thing or made one evaluation of stuff that happens in the end of the chapter. Okay, so we get more backstory on Ren and items that tie her into the developments here. She shows up the end of the St. Ursula arc, so there's that. Then we go back to the SSS base. Some cutscenes. We learn the CGF is mutinying. They invade the SSS headquarters, and we have that race to the city of Crossbell that you mentioned in the first part of the episode. And I agree that one thing I would say this episode, my one word summary, is similar to yours. It is frenetic. We don't catch our breath all that much. There is one breather episode in the chapter. We're denied our home base. We're on the move constantly. It feels, a lot of movement, of plot, of characters, of the setting. Like I said, frenetic, and that's not a bad thing.
What do you think about? Well, one thing that we've skipped over first before I talk about what I want to talk about, but we skipped over the fact that the police and the Bracer Guild have entered into a mutual partnership that those working outside the system and those working inside the system will join in order to solve this problem. And Kevin, you had brought up to me that you wanted to talk about this a bit, to ask if the game successfully actually explores that dynamic that they keep proclaiming, the conflict between working outside and working inside the system.
So the game, in the end, this part of the chapter, has a fairly neutral assessment of bound by rules and regulations, the police, but also the base was working outside this established hierarchical support structure that the government provides. And does the game want us to value one or the other? Because we're in Crossbell, the SSS now doesn't want us to be more sympathetic to the police, whereas we would have been with the Bracers in the first two games at least, maybe three.
I mean, I don't know. I think that the game wants us to see that the Bracers had it right all along. I know that that's a bit of a hot take, especially since we're in control of the police the whole time. But I've been racking my brain. And I can't think of a single time in this game when it's a disadvantage to be a bracer, where the bracers can't get something done that the police can do. The game tells us a couple of times that having warrants can help. I don't really see it. And the SSS is successful because it keeps working behind the back of the police. Same with the First Division when Dudley is helping us out. There's so many things that the SSS is able to do only because it is willing to work against the corrupt administrators at the top of the police. The Bracers do not have that problem. The Bracers can just pursue justice. And we also know that the Bracers are able to they can issue arrests. We've seen that in FC and SC. I'm not sure what mobilization of state resources the SSS is able to do, or that the police is able to do, that the Bracer Guild is unable to do. And at the end of the game, it just like kind of shoves in our face how corrupt the top of the entirety of the Crossbell political system is, that it's hard to see in any way, shape, or form the game praising those who are working inside the system.
You're right. That's a really good summation of it. So I'll change my opinion because in the end of the game, we are essentially bracers.
Yeah, we're bracers just paid by different people.
So that's good to resolve that. So we chase through the streets of Crossbell. We end up in the IBC.
And we are saved by Dieter Kreuss, who manages to show up in the nick of time in a bulletproof car that looks very fancy, and yet he has no problem, it getting shot at. And then he's able to pick us up in what has to be a oversized car because everybody can stand inside of it.
Moving that aside, we'll talk more about Dieter in the end of the episode.
Well, the car is important, right? Because one of the most badass scenes in this chapter revolves around the fact that Sergei is the only one in the SSS who knows how to drive.
You'll hear my thoughts on that. I mean, I thought it was just funny. In the IBC, we get a chance to restock on equipment, on corpses, on whatever. Kia and Samantha are sleeping in the great big canopy bed. But what's interesting is, whichever teammate you have the highest bonding with, you get a special scene with them. I did Ellie. It was very much a meant to be romantic scene talking about, well, barely talking around their feelings. And I thought it was sweet. I think they're a good pair together, Lloyd and Ellie. But you had Randy, you said. What was that conversation like?
For Lloyd and Randy, it was more about how Randy talked a little bit more about his backstory, about how when he was a Jaeger, he killed a lot of people. Like he was not just a child soldier; he was good at it. And it's not like he was disgusted with it or anything like that. For a long time, he liked it a lot, and he's felt ashamed of that past. And Lloyd, even upon hearing that, embraces him and takes him in as like his partner, as his brother. They are two best buds. They are bros. They are gonna fight this evil together, and that's kind of why I wanted to pair these two up. I had seen the Ellie scenes before, and I agree that romantically,
Yeah.
Lloyd and Ellie all the way. Like I ship them. I think they're a great pair. But I really wanted to see this kind of camaraderie, this forged by fire brotherhood that Lloyd and Randy really achieve, especially since Guy being Lloyd's older brother, he's such like an icon. He's this person not almost to be worshipped or at least emulated. He's held up as an exemplum of like the behavior you should do, whereas Randy can still be the older brother to Lloyd, but in a much more down to earth, reasonable, flawed way that makes for good relationships. So I thought it was really important, and the upgraded combo attack that they get, which I'll talk about when we talk about the final boss, is OP as shit, and I love it.
Yeah, Randy is human. And the picture of Guy that Lloyd has constructed is essentially the platonic ideal of a brother and police detective. Now, moving on from the question of should Randy be spending lots of time in jail, Kevin says yes. No, actually, that's a hot take of me. I mean, he's a soldier, so like shit happens in war, it sucks, but that's combat, so I'm gonna disavow the statement.
He was part of a mercenary band that is hired by like political actors to fight wars.
Colin, your advocacy for a carceral solution to everything is extremely disconcerting, but
That's not me. Okay, listeners of this podcast, please make a compilation of every time Kevin thinks that somebody who did a minor infraction should go to jail.
you will find no instances. So after the bonding scene, we go escape from the IBC. There's a series of 4, 5, 6 fights in succession. Pretty standard, pretty basic. I don't have much to say about them.
Yeah, they were pretty easy. Except in these fights is when I truly understood the sheer power of Tio's absolute zero attack. Because it hits a decent range of enemies, 100% freeze rate means that not only are these guys taken out of commission for 3 turns, they're also taking damage every turn. It's a really great way of crowd control. That attack is fantastic.
Forces Tia to get a bit closer maybe than you would like her, but such are the hazards of combat. We go to the Star Fort, the Sun Fort.
One thing is revealed that we haven't talked about, which is that well, two things. A, Gunter can possess people, which is interesting, and yet almost never followed up upon after this. But he also reveals that Kia is like their object of worship.
The divine child. And yeah, we learn a lot
Yeah,
more about that when he's giving exposition in the end. But when I first heard that, that was a big what the fuck moment. I thought they wanted to kill her, not worship her.
but it kind of, reminds us how, like in the previous chapter, Gunter had been like, oh, she should stay at the hospital for some tests, which like sounds completely reasonable. And then you only realize at that of like how much of a
Yeah.
bullet had been dodged by this little kid being like, no, I want to stay with Lloyd. And then you have to wonder, like, at what point do you trust a child's instinct? And at one point do you have to say that the child is being a sussy little asshole and needs to be punished and disciplined and ignored?
You I'm totally against discipline and punishment.
You don't like that novel, huh? And sorry, it's not a novel. It's a work by Foucault.
Novel? Are you a freshman, Colin, calling everything a novel?
That is a really. I was thinking of Crime and Punishment for the record. I got Discipline and Punishment confused with Crime and Punishment, which is a huge sin.
It's like that one meme reading Crime and Punishment, shaking my head sometimes so people know I hate crime, but nodding my head so people know I love punishment. You know what I don't love, Colin? What happened right when we get to the final dungeon? Joshua and Estelle show up. They're like, hey, let's take over the game. Because we're parasites and we can't let something just be without us sticking our grubby little paws into it. That is literally what they said.
That is not literally what they said. That is your interpretation of what they said, and I have a completely different take than you.
So we get there, and Joshua and Estelle have been following it from a distance. Also, they joined forces. They're part of the party for the final dungeon. It's a party of 6. Like, I'll just say, I would not have minded more party members, but give us Yin, give us Noel. That would have been more thematically appropriate.
See, I don't think so. So think about it this way. All through oh all throughout this game, we have seen, especially if you're like exploring Crossbell and you're finding Estelle and Joshua out in the wild, that they're trying to find Ren. That there is this running subplot of them trying to capture Ren again, which Ren even acknowledges at the end of the Ernest boss fight when she says, "Tell Estelle and Joshua, I'll give you one more chance to capture me." We know that there is a connection between Ren and Tio and Gunter through those documents, but also Estelle and Joshua have figured out some of the stuff on their own. They get to the hideout where the guy in charge of the whole organization that had put Ren under such terrible circumstances are. And do you think it would be in their character than just say, all right, we'll leave this to the SSS, we'll just hang out outside with Sergei in his shiny new car? No, they're going to join you.
Have it so maybe they go fight the coup in the city or whatever, or give us Ren. Ren being here would be appropriate. It's just, this is not their story. This is the story of the SSS, the story of Crossbell. This is an internal Crossbell matter. I didn't like it.
I know you didn't like it, and I think that in a year you'll change your mind. But in the confines of this, I think that it works really well through a couple of mindsets. For one, we have spent 3 games with Estelle and Joshua, and most people who are not you miss them and perhaps have some nostalgia for the liberal days. And so like, oh, I finally get to play with Estelle and Joshua. That's really cool. I miss these guys. That's how I certainly felt. But like they were barely there. They were there for like a couple of cutscenes. It's you just are like, oh, they exist at all. They must be taking the spotlight, which is not true. And we know that it's not true because both of us decided to not even utilize them. The game gives us this option. And I think it's to the game's credit that thematically it feels better to have them act as support rather than be integral parts of the party.
Colin, it's not true. I literally said my opinion, thereby making it true. I think it would have been great if we had known, given the siege, showing the CGF, even is still fighting amidst the chaos, the mutiny on large part of the members. Yeah, also making common cause with a former enemy, or Ren. But part of it is also we spent so much time with Joshua and Estelle. For me, as gameplay units, they're boring. Also, Estelle kind of sucks as a unit.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even use them. And Estelle's defense support thing is not nearly as good as Dudley's strength and speed buffs. They're there. I do think that plot wise it makes sense. I like how it's showing off the it's a handoff kind of a thing. And I know that you don't think we need that, and it's the same reason why you didn't like the manga that we had read that like literally weaves into the plot of Trails from Zero. But like at this point, then we finally see a conclusion to the Ren and Estelle and Joshua subplot in a way that perhaps we can criticize some of the execution, but it does come together in a cohesive way. And I don't see Estelle and Joshua not being there if they are in the state of Crossbell. And we know that they're in the state of Crossbell. So yeah, you have to have them involved somehow. And just relegating them to fighting in the streets when the SSS goes and attacks somebody who's so important, who has so many parallels to Weissman, who's so important to Ren, it wouldn't make any sense for Joshua and Estelle to not be there.
About the final dungeon itself, I don't know how much I have to say. I thought wasn't bad. It was there. It was.
Yeah, it existed. There's a couple of good weapon upgrades, which were helpful. One thing that we both of us did not do is we didn't collect the novels, which means that we didn't get an ultimate weapon. So all of the items that we had found were all of the weapons we found were upgrades. For me, I was able to craft what was it, two of the highest armors, the haute couture things that Guillaume can make. So like two of the armors didn't weren't helpful, but that's fine. You get good equipment upgrades, you get some good accessories. One room has a slight puzzle, which was like, oh, I noticed that this statue looks different than the rest. Let's press the X button, which is more inventive than most Trails dungeons are. So that's to their credit. Thematically, it's interesting. And the boss fights, in my opinion, none of the boss fights were actually that tough. I don't think I died a single time in this final dungeon. But I know that you're playing on a harder difficulty. What did you think?
The boss fights in general were fine. I beat Garcia in one turn, not one turn, in one life. I didn't die to Gunter at all.
I had people die, but I mean, I brought them up with
Uh,
like my Zarin powders or whatnot.
yeah, I thought it was fun. It was good. The Gunter fight, with the changing terrain, I thought was good because I had Tio. She like ended up on one of the Explore Space Islands
Mhm.
that appears in the second portion, and she was just kind of stuck there. Not stuck. She contributed, but couldn't move her.
Yeah. I don't think I got any islands like that. What I did get, and that might be because I'm on a different difficulty level, but on the when he turns demonic, sometimes the floor will disappear and then your characters vanish. Luckily, the two that happened to me were Randy and Lloyd, so it doesn't matter what EP they have. But if Ellie and Tio got stuck there, I mean, that would be pretty devastating. You have to take a turn, take an EP charge, and I like that kind of tactical use of the terrain that fight was setting up. I want to see more of that in terms of boss fights because that is way more interesting than just attacking enemies. One thing that I learned gameplay wise in this final dungeon, and I will have to keep this in mind. So we had brought this up in SC when they introduced the combo crafts that we didn't find them that useful. We didn't really use them. Here I started using them just to see how well they would work, and they work really well. I'm fairly certain that one combo craft does more damage than a fully charged 200 S craft. And the fact that they're only using 100 CP per character makes this way more flexible than you'd think it does. Number one, you can use it twice in a row. Because both characters have a pool of 200. But what it does, it increases your available pool of CP from 200 to 400. And if you're introducing accessories that increase CP gain every turn, that's now operating twice for both Lloyd and for Randy in my part, which means that you can get them off much more frequently. Plus, because you're not like fully depleting the bar every time, it allows you to have the flexibility to then use an S-Craft to interrupt the boss's attacks on like a critical turn, for instance, or to use Lloyd's Encourage to bring your strength buff up. Garcia was destroyed by Randy and Lloyd's combo attack. I think he took like two of them to the face and he was done. The second phase of the final fight, also, I mean, Randy and Lloyd's combo attacks, Tio and Ellie's combo attacks did a huge amount of damage that really like brought that bar down quick. So I'm going to be using them a lot in Azure for sure. It was way more effective than I thought they would be.
There's a bit of thematic resonance to the members of this team that have been operating together for I don't know how long exactly, but a number of months. Yes, which is a decent-ish amount of time, especially if you're in combat a lot. They get to know each other's moves as people, as fellow fighters, office workers. So I liked it. Thought it was good. I agree. Now, shall we talk about the plot part of Gunter? I don't exactly understand what's going on. Like, he's part of a cult. They worship, they deny Idios' either existence or power. They don't believe in her. And Ellie just, I remember, was flabbergasted. How can anyone not believe in the goddess? So that was like, I guess atheism is almost literally unthinkable here. But I wasn't sure what else was it. Like, was Kia the goddess? Or was she just the divine child who was her parent?
Well, so Kia, according to Gunter, will become a goddess at some point. That's their goal, is to turn Kia into a goddess and, I guess, unleash humanity's potential or some shit like that. Part of the problem that we're facing is that as we're exploring, I think it was the second stratum, we got like an archive
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
cult's origins, but a lot of it's redacted. So we can like gain bits and pieces here, but it's clear that the picture is not yet solved, at least by the end of Zero.
I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, or I kept half expecting that the society was involved. And Gunter is like, nah, we don't really interact that much. Just put it through cold water in the notion. This was completely different than the other games.
Yeah, no, it's a third faction to the point where the society actually acted against the cult when they raided Paradise.
And I like it because I like how it's not this Manichaean church versus society. There's other factions involved that are not part of this age long, so to speak, maybe may not be that old battle.
Well, we know that the cult's been around since the Great Collapse, so for the past 500 years.
But Ouroboros, though,
Ouroboros, I don't know if we know precisely when it was founded at this point.
that's what I mean. Like, won't know how long their fight with the church has been going on, but I do like there's other actors who have their own separate plans and schemes.
I agree. I think that the character of Gunter, like it's clear that Falcom really likes this evil professor archetype. I mean, we see the same thing with Weissman, where you have the assistant professor driven mad by the need to gain tenure, and then goes on to try to destroy the world and turn into a demon in the process.
But it was not successful because we got to know Weissman over a longer period of time. This Gunter wasn't present enough for it to be meaningful, I think.
Yeah, that's one question that I wanted to ask you is did you, other than the fact that I prompted you at the beginning of chapter 3 to think more about that first day with Joaquin, did you see any of this coming?
No, I did not.
It does come out of left field, and like the game tries to introduce a so somebody who was impacted by gnosis, their primary physician was Joaquin Gunter, and then all of a sudden the SSS is all like, oh, that means that Joaquin Gunter is evil. It
It was a quick jump.
it was a quick jump. Now, I granted the fact that he still hasn't called 5 hours after he said he would call is kind of sus. And then certainly once you get to the hospital and it's like overrun by mafia and nobody can find Gunter, whereas everybody else is accounted for, then we start to see like, oh, there's something more going on here. But it seemed difficult to like draw that line of causality. With the Weissman, we see him as Professor Alba all throughout the first game. When the reveal that he has with Joshua comes in, there's shock value there. But then we have a whole other entire game to see him acting in his role as Anguis and Ouroboros.
Yes.
With Gunter, we see him as High Priest for all of about 5 minutes. And I'm not sure, I don't think they did enough to really build up any antipathy. Well, okay, I'm gonna finish the statement and then I'm going to counteract what I just said. That I don't think that they did enough in order to build up the villain of Gunter. But What they do is they build up our connection to Kia. This is what the intermission is about. This is what chapter 4 is about, 5 is about. We feel this visceral
Yes,
need
yes,
to
yes.
protect Kia. Kia is precious. And so our desire to defeat Gunter is really more personal, I think. The fact that he has designs on Kia means that it doesn't really matter why he wants Kia, what goals he has. And for Ellie, for Lloyd, for Randy, for Teal, for us, it's about protecting Kia. And in that, I think the game is very successful.
I disagree that it obviates the need for Gunther to be more present, developed. Well, it was always going to be a tough act to copy Weissman's profile, essentially. I think a different archetype would have been good because, we're comparing him to Weissman and he's coming up short, being weighed in the balance. So that's not a good thing for the game. And I agree that our focus is helping Kia, defending Kia. I don't agree that it reduces the issues with Gunther that we've just laid out.
I feel that. That's true. I'm not saying that it's completely successful. I'm saying that it is moderated by the fact of a more personal element
Yeah,
that Kia introduces.
I see that. And I guess, yeah, it lessens, I don't think, successfully enough.
Well, speaking of, it's fine, but it's not successful enough. Let's talk about the literal Deus Ex Machina that comes at the end of the second phase, in which Ren comes down. Yeah, I mean, we have
This
another
is a
comparison to
pattern.
make to the end of FC, but Ren comes down on Pater Mater and saves the group, and then we go beat him up with special attacks. What did you think about Ren's sudden appearance?
Well, I will give Lloyd credit how he had the power to resist because of his love for Kia. So he broke the bonds. So I'll give that. I like Ren here in the finale a tiny bit. I'm okay with the Deus Ex Machina in this configuration. I'm not super fond of it happening yet again. Don't like her, Joshua and Estelle.
I liked the scene at the end in which they finally come together. I do like the culmination of Joshua, Estelle, and Ren. I was a little bit bothered by Ren's sudden appearance because one thought kept creeping into my head. How did she get there and nobody noticed? Because she like appears. I guess she would have had to have gotten there first and yet still escaped Gunter's notice with a big ass robot that would have somehow gotten underneath where all the combat is happening. Because we have to remember that this is all in an enclosed environment. We enter into a fort and then we head down. There's no other like airways to get through. So I still want to know how the fuck she got there. Did she walk through the sun fort with a gigantic robot?
I thought she'd come after, and she came just as we were. When she appears on scene, she came to that room like 3 seconds before. That was my impression.
Well, she had to have been there she had to have been there for some time because she's observing and she decides to help out, which means that she had to have been in a place to observe without anybody noticing on a gigantic fucking robot in the dark.
Mystery Science Theater had a refrain. It was that old sci-fi movie watching TV show. If you're wondering how they eat and breathe and other science facts, just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. Don't think too much about it.
Yeah, and we've talked ad nauseum how that doesn't work for me.
Oh, I agree. It's just the game is not interested in verisimilitude in this instance.
It's selectively interested in verisimilitude, and it's at its strongest when it values it highly. And I think that's true for all of Trail's writing. And it's an ongoing element where when they like show their work, great. And then when they just jump, it's not as great. I want to get your take on this. We now had like two real Deus Ex Machina things at the end of the first games of a set. At the end of FC, we have Cassius coming in to save our butts against the Reverie machine thing. Now we have Ren coming in to save us from Joachim Gunter after we had just kicked his butt. Which one's more successful?
Cassius is not the questions of, wait, what's going on? How did this happen? I mean, I don't like the trope in general. Cassius has more of a vested interest in helping Joshua and Estelle.
Cassius has more of a vested interest in that, in fighting against the coup in Liberl. And also, like, FC kept building up Cassius as this hero, and then we see it at the end. So it's like a constant telltale show. That's kind of like dramatic. By dramatically, I mean in terms of the drama, not like hugely or a bunch of drama, but dramatically speaking is satisfying in that. Whereas here, I mean, I don't know how else you would really get what's happening unless you've played the three games previous. And we can debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing because a series like this needs to be able to rely on past knowledge to make a series like this work. You know, you can't just keep reintroducing the same elements. You can't keep explaining everything again and again and again. At the same time, we can only believe that Ren is powerful enough to fight against Gunter because we've seen her be so powerful in other entries. And we don't see it here. We have hints of her intellect. We have hints that something is special. But in the game, we don't, other than that one time when she's saving Colin, we don't see her fight anything. And like fighting wolves is one thing, fighting a literal demon god is another thing.
I'm not too bothered by that aspect, but it felt too much like a coin flip. Like Cassius in FC, he comes in, he assesses the situation, you know he's going to intervene. Like it felt a natural progression. Then it's like, okay, if she decided differently, then I don't think it's necessary. We could have done, and she didn't need to do what she did. Gameplay, story wise, not need her.
Well, story wise, we needed somehow to get out of this trap because the game does fall into this trope of we beat the boss, then the cutscene happens and the boss is beating us somehow, which I detest, and it happens a little bit too much sometimes.
That is a self-inflicted problem.
It is, but it is a problem that needs to be solved, and the way they solve it is with Ren, and at least by doing it with Ren, you allow Ren to show some agency in this conflict with her past, right? She's able to take revenge on somebody connected to Paradise. And I think that's important for Ren's character. It allows her to move on.
Okay, yeah, I don't hate that. But then to have this tension, this climax, resolution, and then veering to the resolution of Joshua Stell and Ren's whole issue does not work, Colin. It does not work. Not their story. Not Joshua's story. Not Stell's story.
But it is their story. It's part of Zero. You know, we can have multiple stories in the same game, Kevin.
He saved the city and focused on the SSS, those for the core four. Then let's tie up something. Yeah, but like, while this is going on, if I was Randy, I'd be like, cool, I feel kind of awkward just watching this. Or, Ellie.
I don't think so. I mean, the SSS has a connection with Ren. You know, we've run into her numerous times. We have a connection with Joshua and Estelle. I totally buy the SSS watching on and like being happy for them.
It's because they're a bunch of Care Bear losers.
Remember, folks, caring is being a bitch.
Yes, I hate happiness, hugs, and joy. I do like very much everything that happens after a lot.
So why don't you give us a rundown?
If I say kind of flippantly, but kind of not flippantly, a political purge of Crossbell's politics and government. Lots of members of the Diet are arrested on both factions. Speaker Hartman is gone. Mayor McDowell announces his retirement. The head of the CGF and police force are arrested. Dieter Cross, head of the IBC, runs for and wins the mayorship. I don't want to sound like a tinfoil hat paranoiac, but say you're Dieter Cross and you want to have the levers of power in Crossbell. Just humor me on this, Colin. Is what happened, could you think of any better resolution than wiping the board clean, essentially?
I mean, there is something to be said about there being such society-wide distaste for the political establishment that then you have a billionaire business owner tycoon type guy who's coming in who can tell everybody he's going to save the world. And in this case, it's not 50-50. It's like most of Crossbell believes the guy. You know, that does provide him with a certain mandate, with a certain flexibility and ability to move around. So yeah, I see where you're going on that point.
It's sus. Like, I would not be surprised if he didn't plan it, but was involved. And Lecter was there observing the fight at the gate of the IBC. He said something about, we'll see if it goes to the old man's, Gilead Osborne's plan. I wonder, I don't think he was planning this, but Gilead Osborne seems to be cunning in the sense of he has goals and he can adapt on the fly and trust his agents. Did he plan this? Did he expect it? No, but I wonder if he thought there could be a way to get someone either Hartman or maybe Dieter in power. That would be the next step. I don't know, but there's something shady going on, and I think it's about Dieter.
Well, we will see how your predictions turn out as we play more Crossbell. One thing I want to comment about the ending, because I agree with a lot of what you've said in terms of like evaluating the ending. I like the return to Crossbell politics. I think it's a pretty realistic approach to how things would go when a scandal of this magnitude actually happens, and especially in such a small community like a city, rather than like a wide ass country in which misinformation can be spread out and stuff like that. Perhaps this particular consequences are more believable 10 years ago when the game was made. But one weak point that I have is that we see the connection between the DG cult and the Imperial faction, but we don't see the connection between the DG cult and the Republican faction. Representative Campbell doesn't even have a portrait. The Eastern faction is very much underplayed, and then we're told that there's a connection between the Republican faction and the DG cult in order to make this a both sides issue. And I think that if the game was going to do that, it needed to put the Eastern side of politics more front and center. We saw a little bit of it with the side quest in chapter 4. That's too little too late. Representative Campbell should have been an established character. Hartman also should have gotten more screen time. And in that way, we can see that it's more of a Crossbell problem and not an Imperial faction problem.
I can definitely see that. It felt a bit, oh, we cannot make the Republic the good guys or untarnished.
I think that what they're trying to do is avoid the problem that you had said that you didn't want there to be. You said, I think episode 67, that you didn't want Highway to be like the good mafia. And they were kind of appearing that way. They were appearing that way in the fact that they were pro-Eastern faction. Yin cooperated with us against the DG cult. Sao seemed to like be rooting for us a little bit near the end of chapter 5. By connecting the Eastern faction to the DG cult, it kind of like still tints that Highway is a bit more evil than we had thought. It doesn't quite allow them to be the good mafia. But again, we needed more embellishment. We needed more illustration of that. But all in all, I really like this chapter. There's a lot of badass moments, a lot of high octane moments, a lot of emotional moments as well. I think that a lot of threads get tied up in a satisfying way, and then a couple of others are left. But we also know that we have the entirety of Trails to Azure to see what things are answered, to see what's developed upon. So I really enjoyed my time with Chapter 5 of Trails from Zero.
We didn't talk about the end.
The end being the picture?
With Kia. What's going on with her?
I mean, other than the fact that we save Kia, and then Kia is like still our kid. She goes off to Sunday school.
Yeah, I thought it was great. She's embracing the human part, the fleshly part. I don't want to say she's rejecting, or the game's rejecting her divine connection, but it's showing her, allowing her to be the kid that she wants to be. She's not being exalted.
I mean, she has friends in the neighborhood like Henri and Ryu. They're going to walk to Sunday school together. We also see Lloyd and Ellie acting as concerned parents in a very real way. And I think that's kind of nice. It's further reinforcing the SSS as a family.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good conclusion to a good game, and I'm looking forward to talking about Trails from Zero as a whole. Before we do that, we'll have the game challenge episode.
Well, I mean, here we're doing a bit of inside baseball. This is episode 69. Nice. Episode 68 will be recorded tomorrow and released before episode 69. So for our listeners, the review of the whole game will come out next week, even though it'll be the third episode that we record in this sequence.
So we're doing Chapter 5, Game Challenge, Zero Recap.
No, so we're releasing Game Challenge, Chapter 5, Zero Recap.
Great game, great chapter, so much fun. Cannot wait for Azure. But until then, we've got a number of episodes to do, and all the way, I'm Kevin, that's Colin. See you next time when we go over the entire game in a fine-tooth comb and we can see my prediction record. I took a look at them before we did the episode, and it's not good.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.